Welcome to Plus Talk on Plus Life. We're all about turning positive into a plus. My guest today is immigration lawyer and advocate, Joe Adams. You also were my personal immigration attorney in my process of moving here a long time ago. So we've known each other a long time. You're an author. You've got the book Extraordinary Aliens. And I thought it was important that you come on a chat because there is so much going on at the moment, Joe, about immigration and immigrants, and I think for a lot of us living with HIV who might fall into some of those categories or be undocumented, that we have a lot of questions. So should we dive in?
Let's do it.
Let's do it. All right. So if I'm living with HIV and I want to come and work and live in America and apply for a work visa, is that even possible?
The short answer is yes.
So bottom line, if I'm overseas, I want to come live in America and I'm HIV positive, for now, that's a possibility.
No barriers right now. They don't even ask the question. In fact, in preparing for today, I reviewed the rule book, and the word HIV, the word AIDS, does not even appear.
So what is the latest then on work visas for people who are living with HIV who are trying to get here?
Right. So there are many different pathways that people follow in order to become work authorized and live and work in the United States. We sometimes call it the alphabet soup. You might have heard of H-1B visas. They've been in the news lately with relation to Mr. Musk. You might have heard of L1 intra-company transfer visas if you have a large company that's rotating executives. You're familiar, Carl, with the O1 visa for persons of extraordinary ability.
Obviously.
Very extraordinary here. It's a complicated process, and the way it works is we file a petition asking for a classification, an L1 and O1, et cetera, and then you fill out a form online called a Form DS-160, and that's where that communicable diseases language comes in. There's some broad questions in the DS-160. You have to sign it under penalty of perjury. It's a very serious document. But again, HIV/AIDS is not a question that is asked. If a person happens to volunteer that information, a consular officer, an embassy official doesn't have any turnoff in their decision-making process.
Technically speaking, on paper at least. What happens if I've come to America, I'm on a work visa, and I acquire HIV? Am I obligated to let any department know or immigration people know that I have acquired HIV?
No.
Not in relation to my immigration status?
Not in relation to your immigration, no.
Perfect. Simple, easy answer. Okay, here's where it might start to get a bit murky. Undocumented people, and we hear a lot in the news, especially right now. Undocumented, I'm living in the US, and I'm living with HIV. With everything that's going on right now, what would some of the first steps you would take to or suggest that people who are in that position do to sort of make sure that perhaps they still can access their meds or treatment and things like that?
Sure. So as you are well aware, a person who is incarcerated or a person who is in custody has a fundamental right to their medication. So that stops any sort of shenanigans on the part of an ICE official, on the part of a DHS official, on the part of any law enforcement. The best advice I could give to someone who is facing law enforcement is to stop speaking. Every human being in the United States, regardless of their immigration status, has a First Amendment right to speak or not speak, and immediately ask for a lawyer. We have a right to counsel in the United States. It's enshrined in the U.S. Constitution. Know your rights. There are resources online at the American Immigration Lawyers Association, at the American Immigration Council, in multiple languages. Know your rights, and even to the point, perhaps have a printed card with your rights on them, so that should you encounter law enforcement and you don't feel comfortable, because they can be intimidating.
Sure.
Give them the card. I'm asserting my First Amendment right against speaking to you, and I'm asserting my right to counsel, your right to your lawyer. Unlike the criminal law, where people get lawyers provided by the state, you have to pay your own way or you have to find legal services, but you have a right to have a lawyer present with you. So don't talk, get your lawyer.
And if you are living with HIV and you are undocumented and you are taken into custody, just going back to something you said there, you have a right to your medication. But if they put you in handcuffs, you don't have time to go and grab your pills. But are you saying that if I'm thrown in lockup for 5 days, I'm allowed to say, hey, I'm living with HIV, you must give me my medication, and they have to comply?
Yes, that's enshrined in the U.S. Code. You have a right to your medication.
Okay, well, that's really reassuring, I think, for people, because I know for me personally, the thought of that happening and I'm not allowed to grab my pills, then what happens for 5 days if I'm stuck in a cell with nothing going on? So that's a really key piece of information people should be aware of. Trans immigrants who are living with HIV. If I've come here, I'm a transgendered person, I'm living with HIV, are there any current sort of any anti-trans policies regarding your immigration status that we should be worried about?
We don't know what we don't know.
Right.
The worry that we had in Trump 1.0 was that there would be policies and directives coming from Stephen Miller, coming from the White House, coming down the pipeline that would never be announced. So immigration lawyers like myself, immigration lawyers with the American Immigration Council, and AILA, the American Immigration Lawyers Association, would conduct extensive litigation in federal court to get the resources, get the memorandum, get the training materials that the rank and file officers were being distributed. Fortunately, there has been a lot of sensitivity training given towards LGBTQ people, trans people in particular, and people living with HIV/AIDS. So there are materials out there right now that immigration officers have been trained on to be sensitive to these issues. There is a long-standing law in the United States, it's enshrined in treaty, that every human being has a right to request asylum. You don't have a right to be granted asylum, that's up to the immigration judge.
Right.
But if you are a person who fears persecution, again, speak to an immigration lawyer, there's some very important timing issues, but if you fear persecution in going back to your home country because of any classification as far as your medical status, in terms of your LGBTQ status, in terms of your ethnicity or religious belief, talk to an immigration lawyer about a possible asylum claim or refugee claim.
That's really good to know. Now, we have heard, unfortunately, cases of ICE agents targeting people who are legally here in the country, who have done everything right. They haven't broken any rules, but for whatever reason, you've got certain individuals who are going after these people and taking them into custody. What happens? What is my right if I'm here legally? ICE comes and says, "No, you're not. We don't believe you." What do I do, Joe?
Right. So I think there's this perception out in the community that deportation is somehow automatic or instantaneous. It's a judicially supervised process. It's not instantaneous. Just like people who don't have the right information about HIV/AIDS can make really bad decisions about their health care. If you don't have good information about your immigration status, whether you're documented or undocumented, or you don't know if you're documented or undocumented, there are people out there who are U.S. citizens who don't know they're U.S. citizens. That happens with a pretty surprising amount of regularity. Become educated. And fear and hopelessness is the recipe for disaster in these areas.
And sadly, we've got people in positions of power who are thriving off fear and all of that. How can one protect an undocumented family member who's living here in the US, might be living with HIV, that just wants to make sure we're sort of protecting or at least getting them set up in case something happens?
The best thing you can do is just be a support for them, be a person who can listen and listen to their fears. There are so many people in the United States who live in mixed documentation families, and coming out as undocumented, it's very similar to coming out as gay, coming out as HIV positive. There's a stigma attached to it. Sometimes people's own children don't know that they are undocumented. And so as a human being, you want to be supportive, you want to listen and care. But this really is a legal matter that should be handled with professional immigration lawyers, and not going the route of self-help, not reading a blog post, not reading a Reddit, and then making important decisions based on that.
There are a lot of people who go, well, that's all good and well if you've got a bank account to afford that, but are there resources out there, Joe, for people who don't have that kind of access, who are working 6 jobs and are barely hanging on, And now you're saying, well, no, get your legal. But what do I do if I don't have the means for that? How do I get help?
Yeah, it's tough. There are great organizations in Southern California and throughout the United States. I'll give you a list so that you can post them to your viewers. But there are tons of organizations. Now remember, they are always overworked and they are way undercompensated. So pro bono, low bono work. A lot of people get into immigration law because they really care about this area of the law. They themselves are immigrants. They have an immigrant history in their family. So try to find the right counsel that works with you, that understands your needs, understands your language, understands your background. And there are resources out there. They're not always easy to find.
Is living with HIV, can that be a reason to apply for political asylum in the US?
Yes.
Straightforward as yes, or are there extra circumstances about that?
HIV status by itself, just like a religious affiliation,
right.
Being a Christian is not by itself a grounds to request asylum. Being a Christian fearing persecution in a country where being Christian is not allowed is a grounds for requesting asylum. So similarly, being a trans person or being a person living with HIV/AIDS is a ground to request asylum. And despite what people say on the internet and what the current president might say, requesting asylum is enshrined in federal law and enshrined in treaty. And that's not going away anytime soon.
Let's shift gears a little bit. What sort of healthcare options are available to immigrants and people? Like if I've come in on an O visa or I'm here on whatever visa, do we have the sort of same kind of access that I can go and get healthcare? Or am I sort of, well, screw it, you're stuck?
What people don't realize in this country is we do have a form of socialized medicine. It's very expensive. It's called the emergency room. And so anyone who shows up to the emergency room must be treated to deal with their emergency. But like everything else in the U.S. healthcare industry, it's complicated and expensive. This is an area that my clients frequently have a lot of struggles with, where they don't understand the U.S. healthcare system. They end up being uninsured or underinsured. And so again, education and advocacy is the way to go.
How does the public charge rule impact immigrants with HIV who are seeking permanent residency?
That is a really good question. So for people who don't know what the public charge rule is, the law pre-1993 or so said if we the government thought you were going to be a burden on the public, in a way, let me give you an example. If you needed round-the-clock care in an institution and did not have the money to pay for round-the-clock institutionalized care, we would not make you a permanent resident or green card holder of the United States. That would be a ground for exclusion.
So in other words, if you're going to be a drain on the economy or a drain on public resources that you can't sort of look after yourself, then we're thinking, perhaps you're not coming in here.
Specifically in the world of public resources.
Yes. Do you think there are any sort of key information gaps that you feel might be helpful to address while we're having this chat, especially for the immigration population, just raise awareness?
U.S. immigration law is perhaps the most complicated area of the law, maybe next to federal taxation. So what I see frequently, and it's heartbreaking sometimes, people will make important life decisions based on the casual advice of what I would call well-meaning and misinformed friends. They go onto a Facebook group. They go see a TikTok lawyer. These TikTok lawyers who are doing a funny dance and are speaking about U.S. immigration law in 20-second clips, and then taking advice based on that. Everyone's immigration situation is different. Everyone's journey is different, and what the right journey is for an individual person is different. Almost no one has a straight and narrow path going from out of status or no status to green card holder or citizen.
Right. What are some of the resources that you think are necessary that would help, especially people living with HIV, undocumented people living with HIV, and are they available in multiple languages that you might be able to suggest?
Yeah, AILA.org, AILA.org, the American Immigration Lawyers Association, has some fantastic resources on HIV/AIDS, has some fantastic resources on people requesting asylum based on fear of persecution in multiple languages. Also, despite what you might think, your local member of Congress, Republican, Democrat, Independent, is there to represent you. Now, you may not want to come out as undocumented to your local member of Congress, but there are resources available if you have an application in process, for instance, that's been languishing in the bowels of the Immigration Service. You can ask your local member of Congress for help. If you have a relative who you're trying to help immigrate, who's stuck at the embassy's not seeing them, they're not being timely with their appointments, we could try to clear that backlog through your local member of Congress. And even in the last month, I've had Republican members of Congress help me and my clients clear through backlogs. They're there to help their constituents.
It is there. Joe Adams, this has been a very informative conversation. The book is called Extraordinary Aliens, which is available now. Thank you for all you do, not just as an immigration lawyer, but also as an advocate and really taking care of people. It's good
Thank
seeing
you, Carl.
That is going to do it for this episode of Plus Talk. We're also going to make this available in Spanish language. So there you go. It's something new we're trying. What did you think? You can like, comment, share below. Let us know. And we are always open to hearing your thoughts and opinions. Follow us at Plus Life Media across social platforms. Check out the website, pluslifemedia.com. We'll also put all of Joe's information up there as well with the post. So if you've got questions, you can reach out to him. Until next time, be nice to one another. We'll see you soon. Bye-bye.